Imagine walking into a party with friends, laughing, dancing, sharing drinks. You go to sleep, expecting to wake up with a beating hangover and a juicy debrief to follow. But for Tamla Horsford, that next morning never came. A vibrant mother of 6, a loving wife, a woman full of life, light, and laughter, found face down in a friend's backyard in Forsyth County, Georgia. Her body twisted, her injuries unexplained, her death ruled as an accident. But the questions? They never stopped. What really happened at that adult sleepover on November 4th, 2018? Why was so much evidence mishandled or ignored? And how does the chilling history of Forsyth County play into the silence surrounding Tamla's death? This is not just a story about one woman's mysterious death. This is about a system. This is about history repeating itself. And this is a call for justice. To understand what did or didn't happen to Tamla Horsford, we have to go behind the headlines. Tamla Horsford was beloved by so many people. Her little humans, her husband, and most everyone in Forsyth County. She grew up all over, beginning her life in 1978 in the Caribbean, specifically St. Vincent. When she was 11 years old, her family relocated to the Bronx, New York. As time flew, so did Tamla. She eventually moved to South Florida, where she met her husband, Leander. Leander and Tamla fell fast and hard for each other, and soon enough, they tied the knot. Leander already had a daughter, but Tamla was welcomed as her bonus mom with open arms. And then the couple had 4 boys together. While their boys were still young, Leander got a job opportunity in Cumming, Georgia in Forsyth County, just north of Atlanta. Excited for the next chapter of their life, the Horsford family packed up and made their way to North Georgia. The young boys especially were ecstatic to be a part of Forsyth's football scene. And soon after settling in, their family of 7 became a family of 8, welcoming another little boy into the world. However, Cumming didn't have the most positive past, and we'll get into that. But Tamla was a shining light in what seemed to be a rather dim community. Her Instagram bio says, "Life is what you make it, so be your best you. #love, #create, #dance like no one is watching." Her friends and family also said incredibly kind things about Tamla and attested to her lovely character. Her sister describes her as a super mom, but she's not just any mom. She's a cool mom. Her sister continues, "She was the type of person who volunteered in all of her children's classrooms, but snuck miniature bottles of wine into the sidelines of their football games." Tamla's mother, who sadly outlived Tamla, mentioned that other people tended to gravitate towards her, and that everywhere she lived, her home became the house that all neighbors and the neighbors' children congregated. Tamla and her family seemed to fit into Forsyth County's community like a missing puzzle piece. Or so everyone thought until the night of Saturday, November 3rd, 2018, which should have been a fun party but ended in devastation. John Myers was one of Tamla's first friends when she and her family settled into Forsyth County. The pair became fast friends and bonded over their son's youth football league. So when John was hosting a birthday party at her house, inviting Tamla was a no-brainer. However, the reason she may have been invited is still covered with uncertainty. The birthday party was a chance for women in their 30s and 40s to let loose and get away from the ball and chain and the kids for one night. Unfortunately, Tamla wouldn't have the opportunity to return home. The aforementioned daughter of Leander and stepdaughter of Tamla was a bit older and had decided to stay in Florida when the family announced they're moving to Cumming, Georgia. Needless to say, Tamla was excited for a much-needed break from being a supermom. The party was scheduled to begin at 7 p.m., and Tamla prepared a breakfast casserole for her family to enjoy while she was gone. A lot of the women planned to sleep over at Jean's house, and Tamla was one of them. So she finished up her casserole, changed into her fleece paw print onesie, and packed up a bottle of tequila to gift to the birthday girl and aid in the party festivities. And she headed on to John Myers' house. Upon arriving at Jean's house around 8 p.m., the party was in full swing, or at least Tamla was ready to let loose. It's reported by the women present that Saturday night that when Tamla showed up, she immediately took a shot of whiskey, but then stuck to her tequila for the rest of the night. Apparently, no one else in the group was really into tequila, at least not that night. The party itself seemed to be fun for everyone, and Tamla needed a girls' night in. But it wasn't just girls there. While there was a total of 8 women at Jean's sleepover, there were also 3 men: Jose Barrera, Jean's boyfriend, was also present, along with 2 other men named Tom and Mike. For the most part, the men gave the women their space. The women hung out upstairs watching the LSU versus Alabama game, while the men did the same in the downstairs area. Eventually, the libations took over, and the men and women joined together to celebrate, even though LSU wasn't able to secure the win. The group of 12, later coined the Forsyth 12 by advocates for Tamla, danced, partied, and played card games for the rest of the night, such as Cards Against Humanity. It seemed to be the perfect party to give everyone a chance to kick back and relax from the duties of being football moms. The party went on and everyone kept drinking into the late night. Tamla, being the only smoker at the party, took frequent breaks onto the upstairs balcony to indulge in a cigarette between drinks. And it's reported that she later switched to marijuana, but Jean asked Tamla to stop, which she did. Jokingly, Jean would refer to Tamla as the female Bob Marley. However, Tamla wasn't the only person at the sleepover partying like it was 1999. The Forsyth 12 were all drinking pretty heavily, going shot for shot singing happy birthday to Jean. And according to the group of women who lived to see the daylight and feel their hangovers pounding, everyone got along and there was absolutely no conflict. But as can be expected, this is a group of women in their 30s and 40s, many with children, and they couldn't hang like they used to. So around 11:30 p.m., the yawning began, and people started to turn in. By 1:30 a.m. on November 4th, Jean started nudging people that it was maybe time to turn in for the night, except Tamla wasn't ready. She said she was really enjoying being around all the women as it was a breath of fresh air compared to her house full of boys. But Jean wasn't having it. She was tired, and despite Tamla's pleas, she went to bed. So, since Tamla wasn't quite ready to turn in, she snacked on some gumbo and waited in the kitchen with Bridget Fuller, one of Jean's friends, who was waiting on her husband to come pick her up. Around 1:35 a.m., Fuller's husband arrived and Tamla was kind enough to walk her out. Before Fuller departed, Tamla told her, "You're really a good person." It could be speculated that this was the tequila talking, but I think Tamla was just really enjoying this time around other women like her. But Fuller's response was a little odd. She didn't seem too reciprocating of Tamla's compliment. She says, "Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now take your ass in the house and finish eating your gumbo." Tamla obliged, but also let Fuller know that she was simply going to have one last cigarette and then would put herself to bed. But Tamla wouldn't ever come back from having that cigarette. This was the last time Tamla was seen alive. And it's curious because another woman left the party obscenely early, around 4:10 a.m. to head to work. She didn't see Tamla or suspect a disturbance. Tamla was alive when everyone went to bed. There was no reason to believe something was amiss. Sure, she was drunk, but so was everyone else. And everyone at the party says she wasn't messy drunk. She was still coherent and in control of herself. The questions that remain, and likely always will, are how did no one hear anything or see anything? The public had the same questions as we do. The morning of Sunday, November 4th, 2018, quickly came as the Forsyth 12 slept off their indulgences from the night before. But John didn't live alone. Her Aunt Madeline Lombardi also lived in the house, and while she made herself scarce for the party, the next morning she continued about her regular routine. She walked into the kitchen and was making some coffee until she saw something that didn't quite look right from the kitchen window that faced the backyard. She quickly said a small prayer and then rushed to the bedroom where Jean and Jose had been sleeping. She woke them up, trying not to alarm them, and said, "Listen, I just want to talk to Jose. I want him to come downstairs with me." Obviously, this creates a little tension, and John snaps awake, questioning her aunt about what happened. Lombardi finally reveals, "Your friend from the islands is lying in the backyard and she's not moving." John immediately called 911 at 8:59 a.m.
Forsyth County 911.
Hi, yes, I need an ambulance and a police to my home.
What's the address? Or what is your name?
My name is John Myers, Jeanne.
Okay, and your phone number?
Yes.
Okay, what's going on?
We had people over last night. We were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking, and we just went outside, and she's laying face down in the backyard. It looks like, I'm guessing, maybe she fell off the balcony, but she's stiff.
Okay, is she breathing?
I don't know if she's face down.
Okay, how old is she?
41. Here, hold on.
Hey, this is Jose Barrera.
Hey, have y'all checked to see if she's breathing?
She's not moving one bit. She's not breathing.
Okay.
I just try to assess her, touch her. She's completely face down in the yard. She is stiff.
Okay. Do you know if she,
Work.
do you see any blood or anything where she... My call dropped. Are you there?
I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was outside.
It's okay. I'm not sure what happened to the line there for a second. Do you see any blood or anything to where, from where she fell?
I don't know if I should move her over. I mean, she is completely face down.
Okay. I mean, can you just check and see if she's breathing? If she's not breathing and you know she's gone, then just leave her where she's at. Do you know if she was suicidal at all?
I have no clue. I've met her one other time. You know, like my girlfriend said, people were over last night. She was her birthday party. We're not the woman that we believe to be deceased, but it's my girlfriend's birthday party. Instead of having everybody go out, she had everyone stay in. And she was the last one I saw before everybody was typically put off to bed. She was the last one in the kitchen. She was just, I think, either waiting around for a ride or waiting until the morning.
Okay. How far is the where she would have fell from? How far is the deck from the ground?
I would probably say maybe 20 feet.
Okay.
You know, 20 feet from where your feet would be on the railing. The railing itself is maybe 3.5, 4 feet.
Okay. And what is her name?
I know her name, we call her Tam. I'm assuming that's short for Tammy or Tamra.
Was she there with anyone else?
Her name is Tam Horsford, Horsford, so a black female.
Since the release of this recording of the call, a lot of people have had a lot of questions. Why aren't Jean and Jose sounding more alarmed? Everyone acts differently under moments of panic and uncertainty, and you never know how you'll react until you're in such a dreadful situation. So they may just be better at composing themselves than others, but nevertheless, it's slightly suspicious. The public was also curious. How was there no clamor in the background, assuming most of the other women spent the night? And how come Jean got Tamla's age wrong? It seems questionable for someone who claimed to be such a close friend to Tamla. It's also questionable how no one had even checked to see if she was alive before making the call. The operator asked Jose multiple times if she's alive or not, and he simply doesn't know and ends up checking if she's breathing only when prompted by the operator. People found this really strange because if she was as close to Jean as the group let on, wouldn't they find out what state she was in first, or at least right when they called? In the call, both Jose and Jean insinuated that they think Tamla accidentally fell from the balcony. This had been highly disputed, but is still blanketed with confusion. A large part of the 911 call is also redacted, but upon some digging, a reporter who may have had access to the full call quotes Jose in a part of the call we cannot hear. Allegedly, Jose says, "I'm noticing a small cut on her right wrist. She's not breathing whatsoever. I don't know if this cut was self-inflicted." If this quote rings true, it seems that Jose could think that Tamla was suicidal and it was not an accident or foul play, but rather a consequence of Tamla's own actions. While this 911 call made people question a lot about Tamla's case, the way her case was handled frustrated others as well. When Tamla was found, her body was splayed quite unnaturally. She was completely face down in the grass, her eyes staring into the soil. The composition of her head pointed away from the back of the house, and her feet were pointed toward the house. Her arms were all twisted in different directions, making for a very gruesome image. It's also noted, specifically by Jose, that she had a very visible injury on her wrist, and it looked as though it may have been broken. It's speculated that the wrist was visibly injured in the same way Jose had been referring to within the 911 call. Within 10 minutes of concluding the call, Responders arrive at the scene. They immediately assumed it was an accident, which may have been detrimental to the investigation. Protocol seemed to be abandoned in Tamla's case. The scene was not preserved in any capacity. They didn't perform a rape kit, they didn't collect any fingerprints or nail clippings, and even the tequila Tamla had been drinking wasn't tested for any foreign substances. They did, however, perform an autopsy and toxicology report, but the results of both just led to even more questions. Sadly, the investigators jumped the gun, and instead of waiting on the results to make a definite ruling for Tamla's cause of death, they went ahead and informed her family that Tamla's death was accidental and that she had fallen off of her friend's balcony. Leander, Tamla's husband, was undoubtedly heartbroken and in shock, but that didn't keep him from questioning the circumstances. Tamla had been fine when she left the night before, so what had gone so horribly wrong in those crucial 5 hours? When the autopsy came back, the results were shocking. It showed that she had died from multiple blunt force injuries, which is curious because if she fell from the balcony and landed once, wouldn't there only be one blunt force injury? She also sustained injuries to her head, had a broken neck, an injured torso, bleeding in her brain, and damage to her heart. But that's not all. Those are only the severe injuries. She also sustained quite a few minor injuries. Tamla's right wrist had been dislocated and cut. She had cuts on her shins and her face, and had a scrape on her left forearm, along with another on her left index finger. The toxicology came back as well, and she did indeed test positive for marijuana and alcohol. In fact, her blood alcohol level, or BAC, was 0.238%. This number is astronomical in terms of Georgia's legal limit, which lies at 0.08%. Even though her BAC was high, everyone at the party attested to Tamla not really seeming that drunk. But it's important to know that everyone reacts to alcohol differently and shows inebriation in different ways. So, since she didn't seem that drunk, it doesn't mean that she wasn't. In addition to the alcohol and weed, the toxicologist also found Xanax in Tamla's system. Tamla did not have a prescription for Xanax, but one of the women at the party did. She denied sharing her pills with Tamla, but later on, investigators would find messages in the woman's phone that proved she was no stranger to sharing. The medical examiner claimed to be positive that all of Tamla's injuries would be consistent with the fall. And you must be thinking, this is 2018. What about security cameras? The Myers home did indeed have a security system, but the cameras were all out of battery and were not functional, rendering them useless. She did, however, have a log of when the doors were opened and closed. It reads that at 1:47 a.m., the front door was opened and then closed. This is consistent with Bridget Fuller exiting the party. Then 2 minutes later, the back door opens, the door that leads to the balcony. It's suspected that this is when Tamla went out to smoke, and at 1:50 a.m., the back door closed. Interestingly enough, at 1:57 a.m., the back door opened once again and never closed. Tamla's time of death was determined to be around 1:30 a.m., but it's not adding up with the logs of the doors opening and closing. So what happened? To add another layer of confusion to this tragic night, it was also daylight savings time. So when the clock was at 1:59 a.m., creeping into 2 a.m., it reset and went back to 1 a.m., making the timeline hard to follow. So it's thought that Tamla's time of death was actually closer to what would have been 2:30 a.m., not 1:30 a.m., despite all the questions that still hung in the air and the uncertainty that Tamla's family suffered. Tamla's case was closed.
Case closed. The controversial death of a mother found dead outside an overnight house party ruled accidental. But the family attorney and dozens on social media are not buying it.
Ultimately ruled an accident, but a lot of people weren't happy with the conclusion. Now, before diving into the backlash and whirlwind of events that continue to plague Tamla's case, family, and friends, the history of Forsyth County is troubled, and many think the town's troubled past affected the way Tamla's case was handled. Forsyth County is haunted by its past, and it's debated whether the area has come to terms with the modern world. Only 4% of Forsyth County's population is black, which is substantially lower than most counties. For perspective, Cumming, Georgia, where the Horsford family lived, is about an hour north of Atlanta, and the percentage of black people that reside in Atlanta is around 47%. Similarly, Savannah's black population is just as high at around 52%. So 4% is just a few families, and there's a reason for this. Forsyth County has a brutal past that is riddled with racism, segregation, and violence against people of color. Residents prided themselves on being all white for decades. In 1987, let that sink in, 1987, a peaceful protest took place where black marchers took to the streets to fight for their civil rights. People came from all over the states for this march, but Forsyth County residents were not having it. They fought back, waved Confederate flags, and screamed obscenities at them. The white people going against the march were getting so violent that 2,300 National Guard troops in full-blown riot gear had to be called in to protect the marchers. The history of Forsyth County is so well known that even Oprah Winfrey made her way down south in 1987, only to make sure she left by sundown.
We bring you today to Forsyth County, Georgia, just 30 miles north of Atlanta, which in the past few weeks has gained the reputation of being a hotbed of racism. Here are just some of the images of Forsyth County in past weeks that were broadcast around the globe. What's the difference between a black person and a nigger to you?
I've talked to black people. Black people, they don't want to come up here. They don't want to cause any trouble. That's a black person. A nigger wants to come up here and cause trouble all the time. That's the difference.
I have something to say.
I'm very upset about what's going on. I don't think that Forsyth County has been portrayed right. It's not only by what's outside right now, but I just really hate to think that it's going to take someone either black or white getting hurt or losing their lives before people can sit down and talk this out.
There was also what was referred to as a racial cleansing in Forsyth County in 1912. Many people of color were lynched and chased out by their homes by a group of white supremacists who were called the Night Riders. This began with the lynching of Rob Edwards, who was lynched because a young white woman had been murdered. And without any basis of evidence, Forsyth County police believed he did it, and that was the last straw for the county. So the Night Riders forced every person and family that was not white to leave Forsyth County. And for the most part of the 1900s, Forsyth was all white. The only thing that still exists in the county to prove this horrible turn of events is an all-black cemetery. It's poorly preserved and sits in the woods of a subdivision that houses many white families in $500,000 homes. All the gravestones predate 1912. Due to the troubled past of Forsyth County, a lot of people in the public and locally thought Tamla's case was handled differently because she was a black woman. Specifically, Michelle Graves, one of Tamla's first and best friends in Forsyth County. Graves felt strongly that Tamla's death was far from an accident, and she made her voice heard, perhaps a little too much. She was publicly asking for answers. Michelle spoke out, insinuating everyone at that party that night knew much more than they were letting on. She questioned why Tamla was left alone in the first place. What struck Michelle as one of the most suspicious aspects of Tamla's case was that she was initially informed that Tamla had died from alcohol poisoning, which is far from the truth, whether you believe the ruling of the police or the theories online. She was accusing the other women at the party of being responsible for Tamla's death. She posted on Instagram and Facebook calling them out by name, which got a lot of attention from keyboard warriors. And they ended up saying some pretty nasty things to the women that Michelle was calling out. It even allegedly escalated to death threats. There was even a Facebook post that had over 70,000 shares from claiming that the Forsyth 12 were covering up Tamla's murder and that they had political ties that protected them. This, of course, has not been proven and is purely speculation from people online. Michelle wasn't the only one with suspicions about the integrity of Tamla's case. Leander, Tamla's husband, also publicly spoke out, albeit in a much more eloquent way than Graves. He says, "In my personal opinion, I think that the investigation has been mishandled, and there's a lot of things that were left back that should not have been left back. I want the truth of what's going on because, the stories I've heard so far, none of them make sense. And if they don't make sense, usually there's a reason." It's devastating that someone so close to Tamla, her husband and father of her children, doesn't feel as though his family has been granted closure. Stacy Smith, one of the women who attended John's adult sleepover birthday party, also noted how the balcony is only 15 to 20 feet off of the ground, and that's simply not high enough to kill someone. She said, I've been on that deck like a million times. I've looked and I've tried, and I don't understand. What makes this all the more confusing is that someone even closer to the case also had doubts. Investigator Mike Christian said that the cuts on her shins matched some of the landscaping that had been crushed, and he said it looks like she had fallen from the ground level, not the balcony. Investigator Mike Christian's role in this case is tumultuous to say the least. A few years after the closing of the case in 2020, multiple women came forward against Christian. He had allegedly been having extramarital affairs and was sharing very sensitive information of Tamla's case with these women. He refused to refer to her by her name and called her Porch Lady. One woman also told the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or GBI, that Christian had sent her unreleased photos of Tamla's body and also sent her copies of the unreleased toxicology report. The women who reported on Christian said that the case took a massive toll on him and actually resulted in him having multiple panic attacks. The mental ailments he suffered didn't reflect in his online activity though. A recovered Snapchat message to one of the aforementioned women proves Christian to be joking about notifying Leander about the passing of his wife. It reads, "Hello sir, I know we've never met, but I'm here to tell you that your wife and the mother of your 6 children are dead. Oh yes, I'm happy to report that she was really drunk. Trip landed face down in the backyard, and I know you have fun memories. Enjoy corralling these 6 boys who are now going apeshit." This message is heartbreaking and just shows how lightly Tamla's case was taken. Now back to Michelle Graves. Her story doesn't end with a couple of Facebook posts gaining traction. It's actually much worse. All of Michelle's personal information is leaked. Her addresses, phone numbers, driver's license numbers, and all the information of her family have been stolen and placed into the hands of everyone who shouldn't have it. Unsure of what to do, Michelle files a formal complaint and alleges that whoever stole all this information from her got it from previous court documents and had to have ties to the local government. But who had those ties? And who would do such a thing? Jose Barrera, John's boyfriend who was present the night of Tamla's death and who we heard on the 911 call, worked as a pretrial service officer in the Forsyth County Courthouse. While Michelle was never given a solid answer as to whether Jose stole her information, the courthouse placed Jose on administrative leave just a month after Tamla's death. Why? Because he accessed confidential files about a current investigation surrounding a death in which you were a witness. It's almost certain that the files he accessed had to do with Tamla's case. Jose fought back against the claim though. He noted how it's the age of technology, and anyone with the right resources can access anyone's information. And he also claimed he wasn't the only one with access to Michelle and Tamla's files, but his efforts were futile. Jose Barrera was fired from the Forsyth County Courthouse 3 days after he was placed on leave. Michelle wasn't happy with that though. She thought he knew a lot more than he was letting on, and that he may even have some pretty strong connections with the courthouse. And she was upset he hadn't been arrested or charged. 5 days after the firing of Jose, Jean, Jose, and some of the other women at the party that night sued Michelle Graves for defamation. The group claimed they suffered irreparable damage, and the suit most certainly holds water, until Michelle's information is stolen yet again. The suit goes forward about a year later, and the judge asked Michelle to download any and all supporting documents onto a flash drive and to drop them off at the courthouse for review. Michelle obliges and drops off the flash drive, but then it somehow miraculously disappears into thin air. She immediately believes it was stolen, as this isn't the first time she'd been burned. But the county clerk's office just says it was lost. In spite of all of this case came of nothing and was ultimately dismissed, causing even more questions to arise, but Michelle stood by her claims. She stated, "I state nothing but factual information which was verified by the case file. I stand strong behind the statement that these people know what happened, and if they were not directly involved, they have not come forward with the truth." She continues, "This is nothing more than another intimidation tactic on their part. These people caused this negative attention by having a party where someone lost their life." In February of 2019, all of this information was released into the public eye, which skyrocketed Tamla's case back into everyone's timeline. The police didn't like all the negative attention they were getting online in regards to ruling Tamla's death an accident. So in retaliation, they released everything. All court documents, time logs, autopsy, incident reports, and quite literally everything in the case file. Releasing all this did the opposite of what the police hoped for. The Forsyth County Police Department thought that by releasing this, people would side with them, see where they got their ruling, but instead, it just enraged the public even more. Tamla's dad, Kurt, came forward, calling the whole thing fishy, so the Horsford family refused to accept the ruling. They took matters into their own hands and hired an independent pathologist to conduct a second autopsy. The pathologist hired by Tamla's family found abrasions all over her body, and even more shocking, found injuries that could have only occurred after Tamla was already deceased. Essentially, This pathologist thinks something happened to Tamla in the house, and then her body was thrown off the balcony to make it look like an accident. In 2020, amidst the Black Lives Matter movement, Tamla's case was once again shot back into the spotlight. Major celebrities like 50 Cent, T.I., and even Kim Kardashian spoke out about how the investigation seemed to be mishandled. If you have a Kardashian telling you how to do your blue-collar job, you got some problems. But following all the public attention, a letter by attorney Ralph Fernandez addressed to Leander was published, and the findings in this letter are nothing short of shocking. It reads, "Dear Leander, 2 weeks ago, we finished the exhaustive review of the records related to the investigation into the death of Tamla. I am glad we had an opportunity to conference today with the rest of the immediate family. Hopefully by Tuesday, I will have more detailed analysis, but for today, however, I want to report some of what I told you. The review reflects that homicide is a strong possibility. Witness statements are in conflict. A potential subject handled the body as well as the evidence prior to the law enforcement arrival. Evidence was disposed of and no inquiry followed. The scene was not preserved. Evidence was inappropriately handled. The investigation was compromised by unauthorized access and disclosure to potential targets and witnesses. A remarkable fact is that there were no photographs taken during the autopsy of Tamla's body. This had to have been at someone's directive because such a practice is unheard of. Let us address one issue as a sample in reverse order from the above. It appears Tamla was involved in a struggle. There were abrasions noted consistent with that scenario. There were parallel scratches to one arm. Since they were fresh, photos would have proven recent use of defensive force, but having no photos inures to our detriment. There was one x-ray, yet the injury noted as the cause of death appears nowhere. Getting the records has been another monumental task to say the least. I could go on, and I will, in a few days. Forsyth County Sheriff's Office employees have been the subject of much criticism. The case agent was a close friend of the subject, who turned out to be the leak of the ongoing investigation. The town of Cumming has a history which raises eyebrows. After conducting my extensive review, I have come to the conclusion that the truth never had a chance here. Let me conclude by telling you that my years of experience lead me to believe that 80% of cases where African Americans die under mysterious circumstances end up closed or cold because there are no videos and the only witnesses are bad guys, or good guys that deep down are really bad. Then you have cases where law enforcement does a poor job and care little to investigate thoroughly because of some connection or association to the perpetrators. A rookie lawyer that gets a video in a wrongful death case where a stopped car is rear-ended by a speeding semi will win each time. A video of someone walking up to a bank teller, face uncovered, and firing a gun point blank will most certainly lead to conviction. But those facts are not what we are dealing with here. Here we are fighting an uphill battle because those who wear the badges and were entrusted with this investigatory task failed you. But this is not over. It will never be over. Be safe. Be strong. We will get to the bottom of this. Sincerely, Ralph E. Fernandez. Investigators were enraged by the release of this letter, but they stood by their original findings. They also negated Fernandez, saying that the photos from the autopsy most certainly exist. But where are they? Because of the spotlight on Tamla's case in the public eye, the GBI agreed to reopen Tamla's case, but only because of the public pressure and a petition that got over 5,000 signatures. Tamla and her family have still yet to receive closure or solid answers about her death. And while everything discussed here is purely alleged and speculative, it does raise some questions. Be sure to check out an Instagram account run by Tamla's supporters called Justice for Tam. Tamla Horsford was more than just a headline, more than just a case file, more than just a mystery. She was a mother, a wife, a sister, a friend, a woman whose presence lit up every room she walked into. And yet, her light was extinguished under circumstances that still don't make any sense. A night that should have ended in laughter ended in silence. And the questions surrounding her death still echo loudly. In a place with a history steeped in exclusion and silence, Tamla's story has become a rallying cry, a reminder that justice isn't a verdict. It's accountability, transparency, and truth. If Tamla's story moved you, unsettled you, or made you think twice about how easily voices can be dismissed, then don't let this be the end. Share her story, say her name, demand more. Be sure to drop your theories in the comments. And let's bring this conversation back to the spotlight, because justice delayed is justice denied. This has been Joshua John with Behind the Headlines, and until next time, stay safe.